The FBI can allege and say whatever they like. They've been doing it for many, many years.
As one of the 5 families that dominate organized crime in the New York region, the Bonanno crime family has a history longer than my arm, so let's try and keep it concise. This family was seen as the most brutal of the 5 families during the 20th century, so don't go making all buddy-buddy. Their origins can be traced back to the town of Castellammare del Golfo, located in the province of Trapani, Sicily. Their boss, by the way, was Giuseppe Pepe Bonanno, and his older brother and advisor, Stefano. I hope I didn't butcher my Italian. The clan's strongest ally was the leader of the Magaddino clan, Stefano Magaddino, the brother of Joseph's maternal grandmother. During the 1900s, the 2 clans feuded with Felice Buccellato, the boss of the Buccellato clan. So in 1902, Stefano arrived in New York and became a powerful member of the Castellammaris clan. After the deaths of Stefano and Giuseppe, their younger brother Salvatore took revenge by killing members of the Buccellatos. So by 1903, Salvatore married Catherine Bonventre, and on January 18th of 1905, she gave birth to Joseph. 3 years later, Salvatore moved his family to New York City and began establishing dominance and control in the Castellammaris community of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So while operating in Brooklyn, the Castellammaris leaders were able to secure the criminal organization's future. As of 2017, the family had 110 established members and over 500 associates. They were responsible for numerous planned killings and accidental deaths over the years, to the point where I spent like a half an hour today trying to count them all. I kept getting lost in my count. There was too many. Genghis Khan rose from obscurity in a small corner of the Mongolian steppe to form the largest land empire in history. For the Mongols, the family was the central pillar of society. Genghis's sons and then grandsons extended the empire to reach from the western shores of the Black Sea to the Pacific. So these Mongols, often outnumbered, conquered through their mastery of tactics and psychological warfare. So if a city or an entire people surrendered, they would treat them well. They'd allow them to enjoy the fruits of a secure world. If they resisted, well, you and your city are gonna feel the full fury of the enraged invaders. Despite all the violence that took place as the Mongols extended their rule, once they were in power, the lands were safe, they were well controlled. In many cases, this represented a distinct improvement from previous conditions. Subjects had considerable personal liberty, such as the freedom to follow their own religion, but at what cost? Because this comes with a price. Some experts calculate that 11% of the world's population died because of the Mongol expansion. That's a lot of people. The Ptolemies of ancient Egypt ruled between 305 to 30 BC and are responsible for such a long list of mysterious deaths that they had to be listed today. So they viewed family members as a fight to the death, where you constantly try to eliminate your closest relatives before they did it to you. So let's say P IV killed his mother, who had previously killed her husband because he was having an affair with her mother. So then he married his sister Arsinoe III, who was immediately killed after her husband/brother's death. Her son, P V, had his mother's killers ripped to pieces by an angry group of people. P VII was either killed by his uncle or his father, we're not super sure on that one. P VIII married Cleopatra II, but began an affair with her daughter, Cleopatra III. He had his son cut into pieces and then sent them to his mother. Ugh. So P IX tried to kill his mother, Cleopatra III, then married the first one, and then another sister, both called Cleopatra. P X married the daughter of P IX, Berenice III, and P XI also married Berenice III, who was either his sister or his mother or both. And after 19 days of marriage, he had her killed, and he was promptly torn to pieces by an enraged Greek mob. And that's just the highlights, folks.
Number 10, Myra Hindley. The influence people have in wanting to be accepted by their surroundings is pretty high, especially if they are lonely or more subservient to doing whatever someone asks them to do. In the case of Myra, she's like a few on this list is part of that group. Myra Hindley was a notorious English criminal who, along with her partner Ian Brady, was involved in the Moors death in 1960s. Both of their victims were young people and teenagers, and the crimes became known as the Moors deaths because some of the victims' bodies were buried on the Saddleworth Moor near Manchester. The ages of the victims ranged from 10 to 17 years old, and Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were arrested on October 1965. At their trial in 1966, they were convicted of multiple killings. Both were sentenced to life imprisonment. Hindley was also convicted of harboring Brady's knowledge of John Kilbride's deaths, and Myra Hindley spent over 36 years in prison. During her incarceration, she underwent various legal proceedings and appeals, and she consistently maintained that she was a reformed person and sought parole on multiple occasions. In the end, Myra died in prison on November 15, 2002 at the age of 60. Number 9. Karla Homolka. In the 1990s, a Canadian woman who gained notoriety for her involvement in a series of horrific crimes committed alongside her former husband. Homolka's first victim was her own younger sister, Tammy. Just 2 days before Christmas, Tammy Homolka was drugged and harmed by her older sister Anne Bernardo and died after choking on her own vomit. The couple then proceeded to kidnap both Leslie Mahaffey and Christian French before both were horrifically mistreated before they were killed and after Homolka was arrested. She conned the investigators and tricked them into believing that Bernardo was primarily responsible, and she testified against him and was given a very lenient sentence in return, though the videotapes later revealed the extent of the atrocities in which she also participated in. Homolka was released from prison in 2005, and Homolka today lives in a completely different life. She settled comfortably in Quebec, where she is part of a quiet community and even volunteers at a local elementary school. Number 8. Rosemary West. Part of the serial killing couple from the Gloucestershire area of England, Rose and Fred West killed at least 9 young women together throughout the 70s and 80s. After tormenting these people, the West would then kill their victims and bury their remains in the yard and their basement. As a result, their house would later become known as the House of Horrors. Rose West also acted independently and killed her own stepdaughter through Fred. In June of 1971, West was then convicted of 10 homicides in 1995, as well as in 2022, remains in prison. Fred West then also took his own life shortly after being arrested. Number 7. Amelia Dyer. Proving one of the Victorian era's most infamous criminals, Amelia Dyer could be one of the most prolific serial killers in human history. Back in Victorian England, people were paid for adopting babies in a practice known as baby farming. Amelia Dyer would then turn this into her profession and adopted numerous young people. She began by keeping them for a time until they passed of natural causes, but ultimately turned to disposing them shortly after adopting them, thereby keeping the money without having to actually raise them. One of Dyer's victims was found floating in the River Thames on March 30th, 1896, leading to her arrest and eventually execution. While the 6 victims may have been confirmed, it's believed that Dyer may have actually killed up to 400 throughout her life. In one of the most sensational trials of the Victorian period, she was found guilty and later hung. Number 6. Isabella I. Although they were noted as the Queen Regent of Castile and United Spain, the atrocities they had inflicted onto the world has been noted as an expansion at the hands of so many deaths. Isabella and Ferdinand issued the Alhambra Decree in 1492, which resulted in the expulsions of Jews from Spain. This policy, driven by the religious and political motives, has been criticized for its impact on a significant population. She also supported the establishment of the Spanish Inquisition in 1478, while initially intending to ensure the orthodoxy of converts from Judaism and Islam. It later expanded its scope. The Inquisition was responsible for the persecution, torment, and execution of individuals accused of heresy. As well as her support for Columbus, as we know, led the discovery and eradication of the indigenous of America. Her desire and need of expansion through led to the world where it is today, left a blood trail of civilizations that were already established before they even got their colonial hands on.
Famous evil number 5 is Hell's Bells. Belle Gunness was one of America's most productive female killers. Homegirl was 6 foot tall and weighing in at over 200 pounds. She could have been out here competing in Olympic shot put, but she used her brutal strength for different uses. Insurance fraud. She is first married to a candy shop owner, and when the times get tough, she and her husband burn both the shop and their home for quickie insurance payouts. Then her husband dies suddenly from a brain hemorrhage, and Belle cashes in. The second husband, married in 1901, doesn't even survive a year. Apparently, a meat grinder fell on his head on accident, which worked out perfectly for Belle's dwindling coin pouch. Yet nothing nefarious is proven until after her alleged death. See, Belle's house burns one night in 1908. Inside, the body of the single mother is found alongside that of her offspring. Devastating stuff. But what kind of threw a pin in that was the dismembered feet, hands, and head found in the pig pen, and then the bones all found in the yard. And the buckets of shattered bone dumped in ditches. All told, the remains of more than 40 people of varying age are exhumed. Suitors, boyfriends, suspicious people, etc. Now here comes some mystery for you. Belle's charred corpse doesn't match up with Belle herself. The skeleton was 2 inches shorter than it was supposed to be, and also it's missing its head. Kinda important for identification, don't you think? The man arrested for the arson and deaths, Ray Lamphere, who was also once her accomplice, stated Belle had set up the whole thing as a getaway scheme and skipped town. Famous evil number 4 is the Beast of Belsen. This SS guard was named Irma Grease, and she is one of the worst of the worst. Coming from a poor rural family, she watched her mother die by drinking acid when she learned of her husband's affair. Now left alone, along with said father, whom she now hated, Irma heard of the BDM, the girls' equivalent of the Yahtzee Boy Scouts, and begged to join. He forbade it, so she waited his ass out till she was 18 and could simply volunteer for guard work. She starts at Ravensbrück and then is transferred to the Big A. Irma had been dealt a bad hand by having such a violent father, and it seemingly rubbed off on her behavior, which isn't an excuse at all. She was cruel, wicked, and patrolled with a whip so she could flog anyone at any time she felt. Apart from being a complete sadist, attacking prisoners and killing them, she was also alleged to have forced intercourse on others, or upon threat of death, make them do it with each other. Yet she's that kind of evil, and it promoted her to the highest rank a lady could get in the SS, senior supervisor. The worst fact written about this woman was she was one of the many party members to request home items, lampshades specifically, be made out of prisoner's skin for her. She owned 3. After the war, she was sentenced to death at the Nuremberg tribunals. Captain Eric Brown, assigned to interrogate some of these people, said that Grease among them was the worst human being I have ever met. Famous evil number 3 is Vampire of Barcelona. So, Enriqueta Martí would have been seen shambling the streets of Barcelona, dressed in rags and smeared with dirt. Don't be fooled, as this was a ruse used to befriend and lure in the hungry off the streets, to vanish into the shadows forever. Later on in the day, she returns home to a comfortable house, sheds her costume, dressing like a woman of respectable means and an alls woman. But when night returned, she's a figure of decadence and luxury, visiting casinos to find new clientele to visit her establishment, a brothel that served a certain type of illegal appetite. See, those she stole from the street were forced into her business, and when death came a knocking on their bruised and broken minds and bodies, she would reduce, reuse, recycle, turning her victims into potions and concoctions. See, this horrific woman also pretended to be a witch doctor. She thought the blood, skin, and bones of useful or beautiful people could cure things like tuberculosis, or even go as far as to stop aging or make someone immortal. Then in 1909, the police come up banging on the door following an investigation, and she's arrested for running a brothel, but thanks to her powerful collections, she's off the hook. A few years later, though, she once again is approached by police, and using accusations of keeping chickens in her apartment as an excuse to gain entry, police find 2 people reported missing. Subsequent searches also reveal a sack containing bloody clothes and knives, then another container of 30 small pieces of human bone. After that, they gained access to a locked room and find pitchers and jars containing human remains, along with already prepared medicines ready for sale. And then behind a false wall in that room, and in the ceiling, and buried in the gardens, they find the skulls and bones. She was taken into custody but died before reaching trial. Famous evil number 2 is the Bandit Queen. Sometimes when evil is given context, it's not so evil after all. Pretty much no woman on this list received that grace except for Foulon Davy. Born in 1963, Foulon was married off young, and her older husband violated and beat her regularly. She would run away only to be forcefully returned to him until he kicked her from his home for not fulfilling wifely duties, and she's exiled from her own village. In 79, she catches a charge for stealing, and her time in jail is also filled with bodily violation and beatings. She began to hate men who harmed women and waited in resentment for her moment to strike. Ironically, it's after her freedom from jail when she's suddenly taken captive by a crime syndicate. One member, Vikram, spares her from being violated by the members and kills the group's leader to ensure her safety. Homegirl falls head over heels right then and there. She joins the group and married Vikram. One night they even hit up her old village so she could publicly slay her old husband in the center of town as a warning. Foulon became an integral member of this group. After every successful crime, she would visit the temples nearby and thank the goddess Durga for protection. However, when 2 previous members return and find Vikram killed the leader, they kill him, and Foulon escapes with her life only to once again be jailed, violated, and beaten. When the villagers help her escape, she starts her own crime syndicate, and every crime committed, she funnels money back into poor communities and families. By then, she'd earned the nickname Bandit Queen. 17 months on, 14th of February 1981, she returned to where Vikram had been killed, ready for revenge. Foulon marched into the village dressed as a police officer, and when she failed to find all the men that she was looking for, she ordered her gang to just line up all the upper caste men in one line and let the ammunition fly. She continued on the warpath for 2 more years until February of 1983 she agreed to surrender to the government under specific conditions. She would only surrender to the Madhya Pradesh police, not UP police. She would lay down her arms only before Durga and the Mahatma Gandhi's pictures. She needed affirmation she wouldn't get the death penalty, and that the sentence of the other members of the syndicate wouldn't exceed 8 years, and she also demanded a plot of land for reconciliation and her entire family be escorted by police to the surrender ceremony. The police agreed to everything, and she surrendered and was charged with 48 crimes. Her trial was delayed for 11 years, which she served in prison, and she was finally released on parole in 1994. She actually later joined politics, representing political parties, until she is killed, sadly, outside of her own home in July of 2001 as revenge for the 21 men she killed in the Ben Mai incident. Our last famous evil is the soap maker of Correggio. Born in Montella, Italy in 1894, Leonarda actually did have the tragic life she claimed. She attempted to take her life multiple times in her youth before marrying Raffaele Pansarari against her mother's will, earning her the boot from the family home. So she gets her own home, which is destroyed in 1930 in a Pina earthquake. She lost 17 children before, during, and after this event, which really kicked off a slow and steady mental health decline. When her eldest son chose to leave for the Italian military, she began to truly believe she was cursed. So she did what all potentially cursed people do: hit up a psychic, who tells Leonarda that in her right hand is a prison and in her left is a criminal asylum. Somehow, this created a logic jump that someone was going to do something to her son and earn a place in one of those two buildings. So her superstitions only deepened with time. Becoming dangerously paranoid, she started to believe human sacrifice was the only way to protect her son. Her first victim was a local woman named Faustina, who she invited to her home under some guise. She then gave her a bunch of wine mixed with a bunch of toxins and then killed her with an axe, and the same one she uses to cut her body into pieces. She collected her blood in a basin, dried it, ground it, mixed it with flour, sugar, chocolate, milk, eggs, kneaded into dough, and baked it. To quote her, "I made lots of crunchy tea cakes and served them to the ladies who came to visit." Recipe must have popped off because she killed the next two victims the same way and produced more tea cookies. And while she was at it, she used the flesh, a bottle of cologne, and a pot of boiling water to produce what she called some of the most acceptable creamy soap. I gave bars to the neighbors and acquaintances. Leonarda's mistake was that she thought she had done it all perfectly and she couldn't get caught. But somehow police came to know about her. At first she defended herself, but when the police shifted the blame towards her beloved son, she admitted to everything. Leonarda was sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in the criminal asylum. Guess that psychic was legit.
Number 10, Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory, commonly referred to as the Blood Countess, occupies a pretty creepy place in history as a Hungarian noblewoman with a notorious reputation. She is believed to be one of the most prolific female serial killers in history, earning her eerie nickname from the gruesome practice of bathing in the red of her victims. This ritual was apparently rooted in her belief that it could preserve her youthfulness, and it sounds like some pretty extreme anti-aging to me. Operating during the late 16th and early 17th centuries within the walls of her castle, now located in modern-day Slovakia, Bathory subjected an estimated 650 girls to unimaginable horrors. Her reign of terror reached its thankful end on December 30th, 1610, when Elizabeth, along with 4 accomplices, faced arrest following an investigation into the disturbing rumors surrounding her actions. Despite the severity of the accusations, though, a lack of concrete evidence prevented the claims from being substantiated. However, the absence of solid proof did not grant her leniency, and she was confined to her castle until her eventual passing. Her evil deeds and the whole blood-soaked castle deal make her a heavyweight in the true crime scene. It's a legitimate horror story with more questions than answers. Would probably make a great horror film, though. And in at number 9 today is Ma Barker. Ma Barker, a notorious figure in US criminal history, served as the leader of the feared Barker Gang, which her sons were also a part of. Gaining the title of the FBI's public enemy #1, Barker orchestrated a series of robberies, murders, and kidnappings across the American Midwest in the early 1930s. Her life came to a pretty explosive end in 1935 during a prolonged standoff in her Florida hideout, setting a record as the longest standoff in FBI history. J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI's first director, once described her as the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade. Hoover's description added to Ma Barker's mysterious reputation, solidifying her reputation as one of the most evil women of all time. Number 8, Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness holds the disturbing title of one of America's worst female serial killers. Even before considering her terrifying actions, she was already an imposing and physically intimidating woman, standing 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. It was alleged that she was responsible for the passing of her husbands, younglings, numerous suitors, boyfriends, and even her own daughters, Myrtle and Lucy. Belle's motive was pretty simple: greed. She gained income by stealing life insurance and assets from her victims. Reports suggest her victim count exceeds 20, with some claiming it could be over 100. Inconsistencies in her post-mortem examination, such as the reported height being 2 inches shorter than Belle's 6 feet, contributed to her becoming a figure in American criminal folklore, often compared to a female Bluebeard, because people will make things up and just run with it sometimes. Number 7. Griselda Blanco. Born in 1943, Griselda Blanco, known by her aliases of La Madrina or the Black Widow, emerged as a frightening figure in the criminal underworld. Hailing from Colombia, she etched her name in history as one of the most ruthless and feared queenpins ever known. Blanco's notoriety reached its peak as a key player in the notorious Medellin cartel, a criminal empire synonymous with violence and illicit trade. What sets Blanco apart is her unexpected role as a mentor to none other than Pablo Escobar. However, as fate would have it, their relationship eventually soured, paving the way for a rivalry that would echo through criminal history. Blanco's criminal empire revolved around the transportation of a certain illegal powdery substance from the fields of Colombia to the streets of the United States. This calculated operation, coupled with her alleged involvement in up to 200 people being ushered to the pearly gates, showcased Blanco's audacity and cunning in a male-dominated realm. Her ability to not only navigate but dominate such a perilous environment proved her prowess as a criminal mastermind. Following a stint behind bars, Blanco's life met a chilling end on September 3rd, 2012, when she was wiped out in a hail of lead, leaving a void in the criminal landscape she once ruled. I'm all for girl power, but let's just put that energy somewhere else, shall we? Cool. Number 6. Christiana Edmonds. Christiana Edmonds, also known as the Chocolate Cream Killer, was an English woman with a really disturbing hobby. She would purchase chocolates, lace them with strychnine, a powerful and toxic chemical, and then return them to the shop. Unexpecting customers who bought those chocolates would naturally fall ill. In 1871, a tragic incident occurred when a young person passed away after consuming one of the poisoned chocolates. Now, following this, Edmonds escalated her campaign by sending parcels of her dangerous chocolates to notable individuals. As the police began linking the fatal and damaging outcomes to the chocolates, Edmonds attempted to deflect suspicion by sending parcels to herself in order to mislead the police. How intelligent. Once she was caught, Edmonds was initially sentenced to death, but her punishment was later changed to life imprisonment due to her mental illness.
The Genovese crime family. Also referred to as the West Side, they were founded by Charles Lucky Luciano in 1931 until being renamed after boss Vito Genovese in 1957. Originally in control of the waterfront on the west side of Manhattan, as well as the docks and the Fulton Fish Market on the East River waterfront, this family was run for many years by Vincent the Chin Gigante, who feigned insanity by shuffling unshaven through New York's Greenwich Village by wearing a tattered bathrobe and muttering to himself incoherently to avoid persecution. If it works. It works. So this family is the oldest and the largest of the 5 families. Finding new ways to make money in the 21st century, they took advantage of lax due diligence by banks during the housing bubble with a wave of mortgage frauds. They appear to be the most organized and powerful family in the US, with sources believing that Liborio Barney Balomo is the current boss. Maybe. Unique in today's mafia climate, the family has benefited greatly from members following Omerta, which is a code of conduct emphasizing secrecy and non-cooperation with law enforcement and the justice system. So while many mobsters from across the country have testified against their crime families since like the 1980s, this family has only had 11 members and associates turned in history, which is not a lot. Hey. They're known for crimes of, oh boy, let's see, racketeering, killing, labor union infiltration, extortion, illegal gambling, substances, loan sharking, bookmaking, truck hijacking, fraud. I could keep going, but we only have so much time. The Scottish Bean Clan. It might sound like a kind of yummy dish, but this isn't for recipes. We're not cooking here. They were a 45-member clan in Scotland in the 16th century that killed and feasted on over 1,000 people during, just 25 years. According to legend, Bean and his clan members were eventually caught by a search party sent by King James VI and lost their lives for their heinous crimes. Alexander Bean was born in East Lothian during the 16th century, where he eventually met a vicious woman named Black Agnes Douglas, who shared his inclinations, and she was accused of being a witch. So after some robbing and the consumption of just one of their victims, the couple ended up at a coastal cave in Benay Head between Girvan and Ballantrae. I tried. The cave was about 200 yards deep and the entrance was blocked by water during high tide. So this was a great hiding spot for 25 years. They produced 6 daughters, 8 sons, 14 granddaughters, and 18 grandsons. And yeah, the grandchildren were the products of keeping it in the family, if you get what I mean. So this clan thrived by laying very careful ambushes at night to rob and end individuals or small groups, bringing the bodies back to their cave where then, well, dinner time! They pickled the leftovers in barrels and discarded what they didn't need. Sometimes that would wash up on nearby beaches. This strategy was used to help conceal their crimes and lead villagers to believe that it was animals that were attacking these travelers. Look, the body parts and disappearances did not go completely unnoticed by the locals, but the clan stayed in their cave by day, took their victims at night. So they weren't exactly out and about. They were eventually captured alive, and they met their end without trial, because folks were like, yeah, that's subhuman, you don't need a trial, your life is over. Sonny and his fellow men had their fun parts cut off and thrown into the fire. They lost their hands and feet, and then game over. Now the woman, tied to stakes, burned alive. Makes sense for the time period. And finally for today, the Bender family. We can't talk about their very fun nickname, but you know what I'm talking about. So this was a family of mass killers. They lived and operated in Labette County in Kansas, US, back in 1871 to 1872. So we've got John, his wife Elvira, their son John Jr., and daughter Kate. And we don't know how many people specifically they killed, but if we're estimating, at least a dozen travelers. What do you mean by travelers? Well, they would visit the family's bed and breakfast, and then they'd be hypnotized to stay for dinner, given a seat of honor at the table, which was positioned over a trapdoor into the cellar. So they'd be distracted, and then somebody bops you in the head, you fall through the trapdoor, game over.
Number 5. Mary I of England. Born on February 18, 1516, Mary I held the throne as Queen of England and Ireland from July 1553 until her passing. As the only surviving child of the marriage between Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, Mary I's reign is notable for her brutal persecution of Protestants, earning her infamous moniker Bloody Mary. Her attempt to forcefully return England to Catholicism resulted in the forced passing of numerous prominent Protestants, contributing to a climate of fear and leading around 800 Protestants to flee the country, unable to return until her passing. During her reign, Bloody Mary implemented the heresy laws, which resulted in the burning of over 300 Protestants accused of heresy. Despite the widespread violence, Mary I was never prosecuted for her actions. However, after her passing on November 17, 1558, the winds of change swept through England, ushering away from her staunch Catholic policies. The efforts to re-establish Catholicism were ultimately reversed, marking a turning point in the religious landscape of England. Mary I's reign, entwined with religious strife and political turmoil, remains a complex chapter in history where power, ideology, and the consequences of persecution shape the course of a nation. Number 4. Wu Zetian. Between 665 and 690, Wu Zetian controlled China as empress through her husband, and later as empress dowager through her sons. However, in 690, she achieved a historic milestone by becoming empress, marking her as China's first and only official recognized female ruler. Wu Zetian maintained her authoritarian position from 690 until her passing in 705. Now, despite the significant achievements in expanding China's territory and establishing it as a powerful empire, her reign was unfortunately also marked by violence and bloodshed. Wu Zetian's rise to power was marked by a series of manipulative and ruthless tactics. She orchestrated the downfall of her political rivals, resorting to schemes such as false accusations, purges, anything to eliminate potential threats. While her success in building a powerful empire is acknowledged, she has faced enduring criticism for the ruthless tactics employed to do so. Number 3. Mary Ann Cotton. Mary Ann Cotton, who lived in the 1800s, left behind a criminal tale that's not all neatly documented. Back then, record keeping wasn't the greatest, so we're left with a bit of a puzzle when it comes to the exact details of her evil actions. But it's estimated that Cotton might have offed around 21 people. 3 of them were unlucky husbands, and a whopping 11 were her very own family. She had this not-so-friendly habit of using arsenic to bring their lives to an end, and then cashing in on their life insurance policies. The party came to a screeching halt, however, when she attempted this method on her stepson, Charles Edward Cotton. leading to her capture and the grand finale, a date with the executioner. Now, here's where it gets interesting. They gave her a short rope instead of the customary long one. This meant that instead of physics causing her neck to snap, she instead suffered a long, slow, agonizing suffocation. Number 2, Mary Piercy. Mary Piercy, born in 1866, lived in Kentish Town, North London, with her lover, Charles Creighton. Feeling unsatisfied with life, at the age of 24, Mary sought more, leading her to become romantically involved with a man named Frank Hogg. However, it seems that Frank was also already spoken for, being already married to his pregnant wife, Phoebe. The dark events unfolded on October 24, 1890, when a policeman discovered the almost severed body of a woman in Crossfield Road, Hampstead, along with a blood-stained pram. Mary's association with the crime drew attention when she displayed hysterical behavior at the mortuary while viewing the body of the deceased woman, later identified as Phoebe Hanelo, Frank Hogg's wife. The next day, the lifeless body of Hogg's daughter was found near Finchley Road, a mile away. This time, the cause was suffocation. As the police became more and more aware of the affair between Frank and Mary, they searched Mary's house and found broken furniture and bloodstains. Mary, seemingly unfazed, played the piano and sang loudly during the search. The police ended up uncovering an axe, 2 knives, bloodstained clothing, and love letters between the illicit couple. Mary's attempts to explain the stains as a result of taking out mice was met with understandable skepticism. The police gathered evidence from neighbors who had witnessed Mary wheeling a pram away from the house on the evening of October 24th and heard screams from her residence. The disturbing truth emerged during the trial at the Old Bailey in December 1890. Mary's defense claimed insanity, but it proved unsuccessful, resulting in her sentencing to be sent to hell. On December 23rd, 1890, at Newgate Prison, Mary Piercy faced execution by hanging, orchestrated by James Barry, just over a decade after her father, Thomas Wheeler, met a similar fate for a similar crime. I guess it kind of runs in the family. Number 1, Delphine LaLaurie. Delphine LaLaurie was a prominent New Orleans socialite who lived during the early 19th century. She's infamously remembered for her role in one of the city's most gruesome and horrifying scandals. Born Mary Delphine McCarty in 1787, LaLaurie married 3 times and became a central figure in New Orleans high society. However, her reputation took a pretty dark turn when her mistreatment of people that she kept forcibly endured came to light. Reports of extreme cruelty and sadistic practices circulated, revealing the disturbing treatment of servants within the LaLaurie mansion. In 1834, a fire at the mansion exposed a hidden chamber where individuals were discovered in appalling conditions, subjected to unimaginable horrors. The shocking revelation sparked public outrage, and Delphine LaLaurie fled the city, leaving behind a legacy of cruelty that continues to haunt the historical narrative of New Orleans.
Well, number 10 will be the Russian madwoman. Always a promising start if mad is in the name. In 18th century Russia, Countess Daria Nikolaevna Saltykova had married a nobleman, but within months he died and left her the wealthiest widow in Moscow. Living in an estate with 800 staff members, 2 sons, and nothing to do, it seems Daria turned to violence to fill the time. She'd punish her staff for every mistake they made, and sometimes they'd even be set up to make these errors intentionally. Then she'd beat them until she got tired of doing it herself and handed it off to another serf to do. After a little bit more of that, her victims would be taken and whipped to death in the stables as she watched. She'd throw logs at the girls because she disapproved of their work, and other victims were stripped nude and tossed out into the Russian winter. Women were pushed from windows, and one was forced to stand neck deep in a pond until she froze to death. She even tormented her victims by pouring boiling water on them. In the summer of 1762, letters by a male serf about the violence and death taking place at Daria's estate reached the Empress Catherine II, who was a normal person and thought nobility wasn't above the law. So she ordered the College of Justice to investigate. Daria was soon arrested and in 1762 was held for 6 years while authorities conducted a long-winded investigation. Many victims were too fearful of retaliation to give evidence against the Countess, and the Countess herself showed no remorse and nobody could make her confess. In the end, it was found she killed a total of 139 people but was only charged with 38 deaths since it was all they could prove. Famous Evil number 9 is Britain's first cereal. The fact that it was a woman, girl boss moment. Anyways, her name was Mary Ann Cotton, born in 1832. She married at the age of 20 and resettled in Plymouth with her new hubby to start their happily ever after. However, it seems tragedy followed the couple. They have 5 children, yet 4 die of supposed gastric fever and stomach pains. Then her husband dies very suddenly, and Mary relocates to the Northeast. She marries her second husband, who also dies within months. Then Mary moves again and starts seeing widower James Robinson, whom her mother disapproves of, and wouldn't you know it, Mary's mom shows up mysteriously dead in 1866. Robinson had 4 adult children, the same that she used to, from his late wife, and then 2 of which suddenly die soon after they meet Mary. She walks out on him after birthing their daughter, and he's the only husband to survive her. In 1870, Mary married another widower, Frederick Cotton. Soon, Frederick's sister, 2 sons from his previous marriage, and a number of friends died from sudden illness. Frederick himself died in 1871, as did the son he had with Mary, who then quickly remarried. And again, her new husband died after a short illness. When her ex-stepson, Charles Cotton, died suddenly after seeing her in 1872, the press caught wind of a pattern here. Charles Cotton's remains were exhumed, and lo and behold, arsenic is found in the deceased's stomach. Mary was charged with the deaths of 8 of her own offspring, 7 step-ones, her mother, 3 husbands, and a lover, and an inconvenient friend. Her death sentence, however, was botched, and instead of the rope breaking her neck, Mary choked to death for 6 minutes in front of a massive audience. Famous evil number 8 is the serial sisters, Raya and Sakina, the first women to receive the death sentence under the modern Egyptian judicial system. Before they left their village in Tanta for Alexandria, the sisters worked as working girls. Once they moved to Alexandria, though, they started killing, but not out of hatred, just for financial gain. Newsline Mag said it best. The sisters Raya and Sakina Ali Hammam ran several brothels in Alexandria during and after World War I. In 1919 and 1920, they allegedly killed 17 women and stole their gold jewelry, clothes, and money before dismembering and burying them in their own homes. At the time, wealthy women in Egypt didn't put money in banks, preferring to solidify their wealth in the gold jewelry they wore. Stacked bangles, necklaces, ears pierced all the way up to the cartilage, the whole 9 yards. The victims were working girls who used to work in the secret home that was managed by the sisters, or occasionally wealthy market-going women met in town. Most of the victims knew them personally and had even been friends with them for years, and it's this false sense of security that was used to lure the women into one of the 4 homes owned by the sisters, where they'd be plowed full of liquor and substance until a group of men would jump the victim, holding her down and suffocate her with a wet rag. That way they could strip her of her belongings, then bury her beneath the floor tiles. What gets them caught is a dismembered, decaying body found in a ditch nearby, and an arm that washed into a man's plumbing nearby. A police officer already suspicious of the sisters made a report that someone should check their home, and inadvertently saves who knows how many more lives. Following a popularized trial, Raya and Sakini and their husbands were sentenced to death. Famous evil number 7 is the servant of God, otherwise known as Isabella of Castile. She and her husband Ferdinand of Aragon ruled over Spain and brought nothing but pain. Huh? Like that one? Anyways, Isabella and Ferdinand are known for completing the Reconquista, which, if you haven't seen our recent video, Top 10 Scary Women from Medieval Times That'll Give You Nightmares, involved the forced conversion or exile of all Muslim and Jewish subjects, called the Alhambra Decree of 1492. Roughly 200,000 people left Spain against their own volition. Those remaining chose conversion and were subsequently persecuted by the Inquisition, investigating Judaizing conversos, aka most of them ended up being tormented to death anyways. Oh, what else was there? I feel like I'm missing something. Oh yeah, Isabella financed Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492, leading to the discovery of the New World and the death of 250 million indigenous people in North America. Then, those who didn't die were captured, put into forced labor until there was only about 10,000 left, and now running out and needing more forced laborers, Chris and the homies started stealing people from Africa. So yeah, this B word is the reason all that crap could even go down, yet here comes Pope Paul in 1974, opening her cause to beatification, aka the path to being made an effing saint in the Catholic Church. She was also granted the title of Servant of God in the same year for her exceptional job at contributing to the destruction of multiple continents. But hey, Elena Ceausescu earned it. Elena was a megalomaniac B-word. She grew up being a failure, even called a repetente in school, somebody who was too mediocre to move up to the next grade. She met her husband, Nicolae, at a Romanian communist meeting in their 20s, and the nobodies, ironically, were to become become Stalinist stars in the country. Nikolai ascended to the general secretary position of the party in 1965 and filled the role with extreme nationalism and monarchical tones. They exaggerated his propaganda, but straight up fudged hers. Elena was made out to be a genius, an innovative scientist with published novels and journals and awards, yet she was an ignorant, backward woman who didn't even know the chemical formulas for water and carbon dioxide. Then, on a visit to the People's Republic of China, she meets and is encouraged by Chairman Mao's wife to take more power. So she does. Elena tramples her husband. In recorded speeches, you can see him double-check his every word with her, and she forces him to assign her high-ranking government positions, earning her the nickname Viper from party members. By 1989, Elena was practically running the country through her puppet husband. That same year, at Nikolai's final speech, Elena screams at her own booing subjects to shut up and that she will have them all killed. Well, protesters swarm the party headquarters while Elena and her husband try to escape. They're captured and given a makeshift trial that ends with a death sentence. As they were both tied up and marched over to the wall, Elena could be heard screaming at the soldiers, "Shame on you, shame on you, I raised you like a mother, why are you doing this?" Elena's final angry words to those fulfilling her sentence were, "You motherfuckers," and she died, a foul-mouthed tyrant.
Number 5, Dagmar Overby. Dagmar Overby was a Danish serial killer who killed, including one of her own, during a 7-year period between 1913 to 1920. Overby was working as a professional caretaker, caring for babies born outside of marriage. Out of all the minors she killed, some were strangled, some were drowned, and the rest buried to death in her Mansory heater. The exact number of Overby's victims remain unclear, but it is believed that she may have been responsible for the deaths of at least 25. In March 1921, Overby was sentenced to death in one of the most watched death trials in Danish history. The sentence was later commuted to life in jail, and Overby died in prison in 1929, age 42. Number 4, Daria Saltykova. Daria Nikolaevna Saltykova, also known as the Saltykchika, was a Russian noblewoman who gained infamy for her cruel treatment and deaths of serfs during the 18th century. She became a widow at the age of 25, and after her husband's death in 1755, Saltykova inherited significant wealth and several estates. Saltykova was known for her extreme cruelty and sadistic treatment of her serfs who worked for her on her estates. She then subjected them to physical and psychological harm, including torment and death. Rumors about Saltykova's harmful behavior circulated and complaints were made to authorities. In 1768, Daria Saltykova was arrested and brought to trial. The investigation revealed horrifying details of her crime, including instances of beating, mutilations, and killing of serfs. In 1768, she was sentenced to life imprisonment and perpetual penitence in a convent. Daria Saltykova died in 1801 while still in confinement, and her life and crimes became the subject of legends and stories, illustrating the extreme harm that some members of the Russian nobility inflicted on their serfs. In total, she ended up killing up to 140 people. Number 3, Leonarda Cianciolulli. My bad if I messed that up. Also known as the soap maker of Correggio, Leonarda was an Italian serial killer who gained infamy for her gruesome crimes in the 1930s. Leonarda's crime was motivated by a twisted belief in human sacrifice as a means of protecting her children and ensuring their well-being. She believed that her killings would result in turning her victims into soap and tea cakes, and Leonarda's first known killings occurred in 1939 when she killed Faustina Setti, a middle-aged woman whom she had promised to find a husband. She subsequently killed 2 other women, Francesca Salvi and Virginia Cacioppo, using similar methods, and in 1946, Leonarda went to trial for her crimes. She was then found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in a criminal asylum. Leonarda spent her sentence in various prisons and psychiatric institutions where then she died on October 15, 1970. Number 2, Juana Barraza. Born in 1957 to an alcoholic mother, Juana Barraza is a former Mexican professional wrestler and one of the most prolific serial killers in Mexican history. Between 1998 and 2006, Barraza, a remarkable, hefty, and muscular woman, killed between 42 and 48 elderly women. This earned her the nickname the Old Lady Killer, and it was long thought that the killer was a male. And it wasn't until January 2006 when Barraza was arrested, fleeing from the home of one of her latest victims. She was found guilty on 16 charges of these crimes and sentenced to 759 years in prison. Considering all of her victims were older women, there is a chance it was due to childhood trauma from her alcoholic mother. She felt the need to take justice into her own hands and kill as many quote-unquote versions of her mother she could find. But of course, this is all speculation, and even if that was the case, whatever her experience was with her mother was a clear indication of her subconscious motive. And finally, number 1, Enriqueta Martí. This Spanish woman is often referred to as a vampire owing to the nature of her crimes. It is generally believed that Marti kidnapped young people off the streets of Barcelona and put them to work in her brothel. It is also believed that Marti killed minors and used their blood and remains in various elixirs, and then she sold these elixirs to the rich, claiming that they would treat dangerous ailments like tuberculosis. 12 victims have been linked to Marti, although it's suspected that she killed many more. However, some historians defend Marti and argue that her crimes weren't as bad or as many as the traditional story suggests. Either way, people had died. All of these women had something in common, and it was their desire and thirst for death, revenge, or just plain sadistic.